Hello, and welcome to DrunkMattReviews. Today we're drinking Nero Marrone because it was cheap at Trader Joe's. And today we're talking about 20th century women. So, 20th century women is pretty much the story of this one guy who's raised by a single mother and very close female friend, and then this 20-something woman who lives in his life. And so his mother had him at 40, and so she's pretty old at this point while he is a teenager. And she's played by Annette Bening, who got a Golden Globe nomination for that. And then there's this close female friend who's played by Elle Fanning, who's a year-ish older than him. And then there's Greta Gerwig, who plays this slightly older, 20-something female. And the main crux of the story is kind of how this guy is going to be raised in the company of three 20th century women. So this movie really relied on and strived to be a written, directed movie, such that the story arc really wasn't great, but the characters were what held the story up and what really developed the plot and the climax and kind of the conclusion in the end. And it was kind of a dramedy where there was a lot of humor that came out of humorous situations more than straight up humorous lines, which I really did appreciate. I just recently saw Why Him with James Franco and Bryan Cranston, and it was absolutely terrible because they were trying way too hard. This movie I felt didn't try that hard, and so the humor came kind of more naturally, which plays off a lot better. Where there's just one situation where Greta Gerwig's character is trying to make everyone else say the word menstruation because it's the 70s. Everyone just kind of can't say it because feminism wasn't really a thing, and I don't know, women just kind of were second-class citizens even more than they are today. But so there was that, and then there were a couple other really funny other situations where the humor kind of was given a chance to shine. And so I felt the direction was kind of good, but it struggled a lot in the writing, where I think it was trying to go for a non-linear narrative in that it kind of started right in the middle without explaining anything. It starts with them, with Annette Bening and the kid, Jamie, in the supermarket, and all of a sudden their car is on fire, and then it kind of explains who all the characters are slowly afterwards, and it has a lot of voiceover, which I really, really, really hate. That's one of my least favorite things in movies now, is exposition and kind of forced voiceover and forced explanation of details, or writing under the very bottom of it, who this character is or something like that, where I feel that the writing can actually fulfill that a lot easier and it comes more naturally. And so that was my biggest qualm with the writing. But it was very funny, and Elle Fanning's character was really well developed, as were Annette Bening and Greta Gerwig's characters, where they had a full arc. They started out as something, and then throughout the film they transformed into something else, which was good. I can't say that all of them are the most interesting. I think Elle Fanning ended up being the most interesting character. Annette Bening's character kind of was abhorrent at times and did a lot of things that really, really annoyed me. And sometimes there are characters that you love to hate, where there's a character that's awful and you love it because they're awful. She was just kind of a little bit revolting, where it was just at some points I didn't understand why she was doing the things she was. Her motivation was somewhat there, but it just, I just didn't like it. So I would say Elle Fanning was probably a star. And then Billy Crudup was just kind of there. He really did get old, though. He was, even in Watchmen, back in the mid-2010s, I guess it was Zack Snyder, so it probably would have been 20... No, it must have been 2007 or 8. I don't know. But he looks 30 years older than he was in Almost Famous back in 2000. He got old. And he's shirtless at one point and looks really weird shirtless. I don't know if that's how middle-aged men just kind of look when they're sort of muscular, but he looks really weird. I don't know. So he was just kind of there. Which brings me to my old people index, which is, I feel old people, no matter what movie they go to, they're always just very vocal about when they don't understand anything. Because there was an old lady sitting right behind me And about like half an hour into the film, Billy Crudup was in this like third or fourth scene. And she's like, how does he know her? And I kind of like turned around a little bit and I realized that I agreed with that old person. So I'd say this gets a C- on the old people index because I sort of agreed with that old lady vocalizing her confusion, because old people are just always confused at everything and they always yell it out and they're always sitting right behind me. Just doesn't matter in the movie, doesn't matter where I see it, what time. It's one of just the universal constants is there's always old people around and they have no idea what's going on. So I think those are my biggest. One more big problem was the narration, where I found that Silence had this problem too, where it relied very heavily on the narration for exposition, and then halfway through it changes characters and changes times, where instead of revealing things in the present, it reveals things in the past and kind of like picks up to where the present is and then changes a little bit, and then all of a sudden jump to the future for one character. One of the characters just reveals something very, very, very far in the future that didn't feel appropriate in the scene, and then the ending of the film had a lot of that. Where it didn't, I feel like the writers didn't know how to end it, so they just ended it with basically an epilogue of characters saying like what happens in the future, which was something, I guess. It kind of gave resolution, but not, it didn't resolve in a good way in that I felt that there was completion for the characters and I felt that they had all undergone their own character arcs. It just kind of ended. You're just kind of like given the ending and it was like, here you go. I don't care if you want it or not. So I guess those are probably my biggest problems. But now the good things. The writing was fantastic. The humor was fantastic. This movie, which is set in 1979, you get like a cool Jimmy Carter sequence. Like, I feel badly for Jimmy Carter. It was his speech about like individualism in 1979 when he probably knew that he was going to lose to Reagan. And I think we had hostages in Iran, and there was the fuel crisis, which they actually referenced. Like, I feel badly for Jimmy Carter. Like, he might have been an okay president if he was given a better hand of cards to play. Like, he may have had the worst hand dealt for him of any president since like Lincoln or Buchanan. I guess Truman had a really bad hand. Well, he still struggled with a lot of horrible things that were occurring back in the late 70s. And so they had his speech going on. And there was a lot of music. What was he talking about? Oh, the 70s, yeah. So there was like a lot of music and it felt like very 70s-ish. And like it was about kind of punk growing out of something, out of like disco in the 70s. And there were like hippie communes and like people just being like groovy and all the free love and like the women's rights movement. And so music was a very important part of that. And I felt that music actually was better in this movie than it was in most, where in most movies, music was just kind of this thing that you do to either change scenes or to like feature a dancing scene or to feature like kind of a scene where you don't want to write dialogue because a character is going to express something with their face and you don't really know what to do with sound. I felt that this movie actually used music in a better way than that, where it kind of expressed the emotion of the scene and was able to move between multiple different scenes and to express emotions between characters that often directors, I feel, struggle with. And it really didn't feel too obtrusive, and it did feel like the 70s. Like, it's one thing to just use music of the era. It's another thing to use music of the era in a way that makes it feel as though you were there. Because I'm too young to be in the 70s, but I felt as though I could embrace the 70s and like I could experience it through this movie. So in the end, this movie was pretty good. I would say on a scale of A to Z, where A is the worst. A is like horrible, like Robin Hood by Ridley Scott with Russell Crowe as Robin Hood, the worst movie, all the way up to Z, which is Inception. I would say this movie is probably it's more in the P to R range, maybe even an S on a good day if you're really feeling it. And so going forward, I really hope this kid, whose name is Lucas Jade Zuman, has a future in acting. He wasn't bad. I really did enjoy him in the movie. I hope he has a future. Elle Fanning is fantastic. I will continue to enjoy everything that she's in, and I'll probably see Live by Night, which she also starred in, at some point this weekend. So I'm sure they'll all do well. And Annette Bening, hopefully she'll get an Oscar. Does she really do? I feel like she might get an Oscar nomination because this is a weak year for women, where the best actress and best supporting actress categories are not really super determined. Like best actor this year, you got Denzel for Fences, you got Casey Affleck for a rape allegation, and for Manchester by the Sea. So a little bit of a plus and a lot of a negative. It's really tough to gauge that. I feel like women are not as strong. So you have like Natalie Portman for Jackie is like a really good one. Viola Davis for Fences is a pretty good one. And then you have weird like Jessica Chastain for Miss Sloane, which is horrible. You have like Amy Adams for, I mean, you could do her for Nocturnal Animals or for Arrival. Because I feel like she was better in Arrival, but Nocturnal Animals is kind of more of an Oscar performance. And so I feel like Greta Gerwig will just, or not Greta Gerwig, Annette Bening will just kind of shove her way in there. And then there's the French chick for Elle who won the Golden Globe. And so maybe she'll get one. It's kind of tough to tell. I don't know. And so going forward, I don't think this movie, I think maybe one Oscar nomination for Best Actress. I don't think it's going to get anything else. I don't think it's going to get Best Picture, which it had for musical or comedy at the Golden Globes. I don't think it's going to get an overall Best Picture at all. And so, yeah, that's the review. Peace.